Bienvenue, bonjour, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us and attending our recorded online engagement, Ignite Series Agriculture. I am so happy that you carved out space in your day to share it with us. My name is Crystal Olson, and I am a Community Engagement Coordinator with Research Impact Canada, housed in York University, where we are working on behalf of the Future Skills Centre to refresh a community of practice for the skills and workforce development sector. And we are I am so excited to be talking agriculture with you today. And I'm going to turn it over briefly to my colleague Megan for a quick introduction in French.
Bonjour, merci de nous rejoindre aujourd'hui pour la série Ignite qui met en lumière les innovations dans le secteur d'agriculture. Cette session est disponible avec une interprétation simultanée. Vous pouvez écouter ce webinaire en français en cliquant sur l'icône du globe situé dans la barre inférieure de votre écran de Zoom et en sélectionnant la chaîne de langue française. Si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans la boîte de discussion.
Merci, Megan, and thank you so much. So before introducing our presenters for the day, just a few housekeeping items to go over. So just taking a quick look at our agenda for the day, for the time that we'll be sharing together. Just going to go over a brief introduction and overview before we turn it over to our main presenters for the day, who are going to be talking about their area of work using a PechaKucha-style presentation. Now, for those of you not familiar with this style of presentation, it's a presentation of 20 slides for a duration of 20 seconds each. And this is where our series title was created from, because we want to ignite some excitement about agriculture. Now, then you are going to have an opportunity to join a breakout room with one of our presenters today, where you can ask them questions directly based on your own area of interest. And we will have facilitators in each of the breakout rooms, as well as French support. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull everyone back into the main room to close things off with a quick report back about some of the topics that were discussed in the breakout room before wrapping up the event today. So as we are meeting virtually and not all gathered in the same space, we recognize that the land acknowledgement might not be for the territory you are currently on. We ask that if this is the case, to acknowledge in the chat box the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders, or if the land is unceded. Now, Marie, one of my colleagues, is going to be dropping a link in the chat to a great website that has lots of information and lesson plans to help you learn more about the traditional lands that you walk on. As for us here at Research Impact Canada, led by York University, we recognize our presence on the area known as Tegrando, which has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. And we acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now, I myself am quite fortunate to live and work remotely just outside of Thunder Bay, Ontario, from a small farm on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe people and the home of the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation, located on the beautiful western shores of Lake Superior, signatory to the Robertson-Superior Treaty of 1850. And I would also like to recognize and honor the Métis Nation, a distinct Indigenous community with deep historical and cultural ties to these lands. And thank you so much for folks entering in the chat where they're coming from today. So many folks from across the country, and wonderful to see some nations and names of territories that I'm myself not familiar with, but happy that we do have this great website where we can go and check that out as well. So thank you for sharing. So a quick note about the Zoom accessibility tools available to you. We do have simultaneous French interpretation. of today's event by interpreters Madeline and Cressida on the French channel. So if you would prefer to participate in French, you can click on the interpretation button, which has that icon of the globe found at the bottom of the toolbar, and select the French channel. You can also access the closed captioning of today's presentation by clicking the closed captioning of today's presentation by clicking on the live transcript button. And we have also enabled the chat feature for you to share your ideas or comments with the audience and add any questions that you may have during the presentation. And we do have lots of our RIC staff and team members here today who will be monitoring the chat, and we'll strive to answer all of your questions as well. Great, thank you so much. I'm just looking at the chat now. I see Ben is here, wonderful, thank you so much. Just a quick note, we are recording and we'll make this the main presentation available to everyone today. And we also have a graphic designer with us, Ashton from Mind's Eye Creative, who will be sharing some of the topics and things that we've captured over the course of today. So, today's presentation will have some interactive features, and outside of the Zoom chat, we're actually going to be using Slido. So to participate in this virtual setting, you have kind of two options to get there. You can use your smartphone and scan that QR code, which will launch right to the Slido event, or in your web browser, you can type in slido.com and use on your PC or on your smartphone, and then type in the number that you see on the screen here. So 4606695. So Slido will allow you to participate in activities over the course of our time together. So please just leave it open until the end. Now, if you choose not to engage in Slido, because one more technology was one too much, that's totally fine. Please know that we encourage you to participate in all of the activities by entering your insights into the chat box. So with that said, let's get started and trying out Slido. So I'm hoping that everyone is able to access Slido. And I can see we've got 2 participants already joining and typing now, but you can use your QR code to scan or go to the website slido.com, and you can tell us your name, where you're coming from, the organization you're with. It would be great. We would love to see that engagement. So we've got Kieran from Cambridge with 4-H Ontario. Awesome. Lots of folks with research. We've got somebody from Grimsby. We've got Dave in Thunder Bay. Hi, Dave. Haley with Roots and Rivers, of course. Hi, Mike from Osgood, Ontario. Oh, we've got Leslie from Omafra. Wonderful. Seeing so many. It's interesting. Lucy from Thunder Bay CEDC. It's nice to see some local folks. Oh, great. Jack out in BC. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Awesome. Lots of places from all over. It's showing kind of interesting there. So great. Thank you so much for sharing. I see there's just a few more folks chatting, or typing in, but I'll go ahead and close that and move on to our next slide. So thank you for sharing some of the information that where you're joining us from today. So just before we get into the presentations today, I wanted to provide an overview of Canada's agri-food system. The overall contribution of agriculture to Canada's economy goes far beyond the work performed within the traditional farm boundaries. And primary agriculture is the key building block for downstream food and beverage processing industries, retailers, food service providers, and other industries that all rely on agricultural inputs. Additionally, primary agriculture helps support those upstream industries and knowledge economies, from seed fertilizer, other chemical inputs, to engineering and veterinary services, pharmaceuticals, and academia. So when we are looking at the issues which are affecting agriculture across Canada, it is so much broader than what is commonly perceived. So if we think about Canada's urban areas as the engines of economic growth, it's rural Canada that provides the food and the fuel to that. And about 70% of the food that we consume is homegrown in these rural communities across Canada. And about 50% of what is domestically produced is exported, making Canada the world's fifth largest food exporter. So taking a look at the screen there, and I have it off to the side. So if you see me turning my head, I've got two screens and that's why. But if we look at the last census and data from census, when we look at the whole agri-food industry itself across Canada, it employs about 1 in 9 people in Canada, offers 1 in 9 jobs, and also generates just under 7% of Canada's national GDP. Now, just like every other sector across Canada, within the agricultural sector itself, we are confronting generational shifts and challenges from the consequences of everything from climate change and food sustainability and security to automation and technology adoption, labor scarcity due to demographic shifts, and all the factors contributing to that, including immigration policy. Now, I'm not going to step on Dana's toes here, not Dana, sorry, on Phyllis's toes when she's going to talk about the National Workforce Strategy here. But Marie has also shared in the chat there a newly released report from May of this year from the Government of Canada that really takes an in-depth look into some of the challenges faced by labor in this sector. So I do encourage you to check it out. And of course, like so many other industries, the challenges of labor include recruitment, retention, skills and training, automation, and capacity building themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop sharing my screen right now with you fine folks, because I'd like to turn it over to our presenters for today. So we're going to start with Agritech North. So welcome, Benjamin. So Benjamin Fegan Jr. is the Métis CEO and founder of Agritech North, a first of its kind year-round grower in Northwestern Ontario, which produces over 80 plus crops in a controlled environment agriculture vertical farm. Benjamin has a Master's of Science in Urban Ecology from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York in the US, and has previously worked with the US Department of Energy National Laboratories, conducting and overseeing energy and urban ecology projects, providing capabilities and apparatus inventions, infrastructure validations, public and industry adoption planning, and federal grade research. So I will turn it over to Benjamin. Please feel free to go ahead when you're ready.
All right. So my name is Benjamin Fegan, Agritech North, and today I'll be presenting on our pilot facility and some of the different initiatives that we have going on. I'm just trying to get it to slides for me. There we go. So today I'm here not just on behalf of myself and our organization, but we also collaborate with a number of other food producers in our region, everything from meat products to cheese, sprouts, wild foraged goods as well. So we're really developing a more broad food system in addition to our own primary production that benefits all food producers in our region. So we grow over 80 varieties as a primary producer of leafy greens, small fruiting crops, and herbs. And we don't have any processing on site, so we just do raw goods right now, but in our near future, we do propose to add that capability as well. We're predominantly focused on rural and remote communities. We don't export any of our food products. More than 70% of what's grown in greenhouses in Ontario is exported. 100% of what we produce is dedicated to Canadian residents. We focus on rural and remote communities because of this disparity in the cost of food in our underserved communities, especially Indigenous communities. I'm Indigenous myself, Métis, And our First Nations communities especially are one of our biggest priorities to reduce the cost of food. Our social mission as a beneficial corp is to reduce fresh food costs in Indigenous communities by at least 25% and increase availability in communities to be year-round. Most of these communities that are in our region eat out of a box or a can out of necessity because of just how expensive fresh produce is and how bad quality it is. So there are multiple factors at play in that, and we're developing the food system to try and resolve these issues. We realize that at the core of the solution is really public education, and we're starting with kids as part of an UMAFRA-funded project, grassroots growth initiative, to put year-round growing units in our schools because our school semesters don't align with the academic year. And so the only way to really learn agriculture hands-on in the classroom is with year-round operations. And so we're putting these little growing units and developing curricula for our grade schools to directly replace existing curricula, as opposed to it always being an extracurricular activity and extra responsibility for teachers. We're also very much focused on sustainability. So we have a completely OK Compost Home certified packaging line. So we're decades ahead of the rest of the agriculture industry as far as packaging is concerned. This is the only certification in the world that we know of right now. I think Australia just released one as well, though, so that may be incorrect now, but that guarantees that if you bury it in the ground or you put it in your backyard compost, it will break down. Other compostable materials require commercial or industrial facilities that our remote communities simply don't have. And as a result, trash is piling up in remote communities because there's not enough space to put all of the packaging that's being shipped up with fresh food products. We're also doing energy projects. So we're doing a solar tri-generation system where we're harvesting heat with a radiator in the solar panels and energy at the same time. So in the same footprint, we can get 3 times more energy out of it. And we can take that heat and invert it to cooling with an absorption chiller, which is an old 1960s industrial technology. So we can provide heating, cooling, and energy to year-round growing operations. The goal really is to not just have our vertical farm like pictured in the prior model, but also to be working with our collaborators. I'm actually at College Boreal right now in the middle of a day long of meetings specifically about this project, which is first of kind triple or potentially quadruple layer ETFE greenhouse envelope, which is almost twice as insulating as glass. And so it'll outperform glass in every way, including price, once it's a developed market. And so it will completely revolutionize the indoor growing market. And our technologies, in combination with the thermal management I talked about with solar panels, will be able to take excess heat from vertical farms. Most of your energy cost is air conditioning. You can take all that extra heat and actually just dump it in the greenhouse. So when these technologies are put together, they work much better together. And these are really our solutions for rural and remote communities to get us towards a net zero, energy independent, year-round growing operation for food for those communities. So this is what our facility looked like before we started growing after renovations. This is what it looks like with some of the product in it. Our base technology, our initial technology that we chose is based off of the towers. But we plan when we expand to have multiple varieties of different growing systems to facilitate a training center, essentially, where you can learn multiple different growing technologies, the benefits and drawbacks of each of them, and which crops are best for which systems. And you really want to have in a rural community that you can't monocrop because you don't have the market for it, right? So we're looking at how we grow all these 80 varieties or even more in remote communities and fulfill all of their dietary requirements. We're not having to ship product in. So this is kind of what some of our seedlings look like in the farm as well. So everything from lettuces to kales to herbs like mints. And all of these different varieties and the capability that this potentially provides as a revolutionary set of technologies to reach independent growing operations in rural communities has spawned essentially a new mandate with Grand Council Treaty 3 that they just passed, that includes 5 initiatives. And in those 5 major initiatives includes food access. We're putting trade centers with frozen refrigerated room temperature storage in every community, and also working towards adult education programs and year-round growing operations in the communities. So that way they can actually be producing their own food and potentially be feeding food into the larger food marketplace. We also do 3D printing components, so trying to make the means of production 3D printable, so that way remote communities aren't waiting for spare parts from a broken distribution chain. And lastly, we also work with drone technology to try and eliminate minimum order quantities that are required for float planes or larger planes to get fresh food products into remote communities. Thank you very much. That's a presentation. We're up to a lot. You know, we're constantly working on these innovative capabilities and bringing them to market, so that way we can repeat them in other treaty territories as well. Thank you.
That is just amazing, Benjamin. Thank you so much for sharing. I think looking at the being in a rural and serving remote communities, certainly the amount of innovations that you are undertaking right now is just amazing, and I think would love to see replicated across the country. So I'm sure folks will have lots of questions for you during the breakout room. So thank you for sharing your insights on that. Next, we are going to move to our next presentation, which is Phyllis McCollum. So Phyllis is the Program Manager of Agri-LMI at the Canadian Agricultural Human Resources Council, or CARC. She manages all the activities and initiatives related to the National Workforce Strategy and Agri-Diversity Program. So I'll turn it over to you, Phyllis. Please feel free to go ahead when you are ready.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this call today. I see a few familiar names on the guest list, but a lot of new ones. So hopefully this is informative for you. So I am Program Manager of the Agri-LMI and Agri-Diversity file at CARC, and the lead for the National Workforce Strategic Plan for Agriculture and Food and Beverage Manufacturing. So let's see if we can keep up with our 20 seconds here. There we go. Okay, so why have we developed this strategy? So agriculture is, I'm just going to move a little screen over here. There we go. Agriculture and food and beverage manufacturing is facing a deliberate workforce crisis. So the strategy is here to, as a result of inhabited growth. Oh my goodness, we're moving along. Okay, here we go. Gotta get myself organized. So the action plan and roadmap here that we show is short term, which is May of this year, medium term, looking at 2025, and then long term into 2030. So a 10-year roadmap, and we are currently now working on the short term solutions. This is the workforce strategy in a nutshell. We have 5 focus areas that you can see in the middle of the circle, and then 5 key key foundational areas on the outside, which are pieces that float amongst them as we move through discussions. Industry partnership is key to this project and wouldn't have been able to happen without it. We have over 65 stakeholders involved in the working groups, and over 100 participants in activities and initiatives that are happening throughout the workforce strategy. These are all amongst the participation is split between agriculture and food and beverage equally for most of it. One of the workforce pillars is perceptions and awareness. So we're trying to increase the perception and awareness of Canada's ag and food and beverage manufacturing sector to potential workers, including those in underrepresented groups, increasing the positive perception of employment in the industry, and raising awareness of career options. People and workplace culture is the attraction, retention of workers. So creating an inclusive workplace and fostering environments that create attractiveness to those who may not be traditional ag job seekers. For immigration and foreign workers, the importance of this of this working group to the sector is of utmost reliance in the short term. They play a critical role in ag and food and beverage manufacturing, and we want to ensure that we have the ability to access this workforce moving forward. So they are looking at policy procedures and recruitment options for bringing temporary foreign workers into the sector. Skill development is looking at the necessary skill requirements both for today and for the future of the workforce. And so competencies, job requirements, and the skills necessary to obtain them, either through traditional training or potentially micro-credentialing moving forward. And lastly is our automation and technology pillar. And so understanding and fostering the culture of innovation is critical to the sustainability of the sector. And so we want to ensure that we have the knowledge around us to make a significant impact on the skill requirements that are necessary for automation and technology and how they play into our workforce strategy. For our foundational themes, I'm just going to slow this down slightly. For our foundational themes, we have competitiveness and profitability. So all of our recommendations are set to ensure that businesses can remain competitive and profitable. Data management is a key factor. And so we don't have enough data around us to have these conversations. And so we're doing some research work that I'm going to talk about shortly. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is very important to us, and we continue to work with underrepresented groups to ensure they have accessibility to the sector. Our Indigenous relations are also key as we continue to build that stakeholder group, and I'll talk a bit more about that. And then lastly is infrastructure. We can't bring folks to the industry if we don't have the infrastructure around us to support them. And so we're doing some research work to understand what's necessary for the industry. In the fall, we released an interim report just to highlight where we were in the strategy. We collected signatures for Minister Bibeau, and this and was submitted to Minister Bibeau, sorry. And this report highlights the key objectives, action items, and the SWOT analysis that were completed by each of the working groups. Oh my, this is really fast. Yeah, okay, so we can go from there. We did a skills symposium, which had objectives and to identify the skills necessary for the workforce and clarify some of the action items for the working groups that are doing skill development. And then a key piece, and what Marie Page shared in the chat box, was that AFC produced a report, and we're working very closely with them in what we're doing and what they're doing in the way of industry and government relations. And so we continue to work with them closely and have opportunities to speak with the departments on different levels regarding different aspects of their labor strategy and how we can contribute to that. So for research items, each of the 5 pillars have a research piece. So skills here, we've done a little bit on equity, diversity, and inclusion and the barriers to entering the sector. We're also doing some compensation work on monetary and non-monetary benefits for the pork and salmon industries, and we're creating a benchmarking tool for that compensation work. So that will be coming over the summer. We've done some perceptions research, which is barriers to entering the workforce for non-traditional job seekers, post-secondary education work on what opportunities there are available for graduation, and like I said, the infrastructure research, which is understanding what is needed to bring people to the sector. And the last 2 are the temporary foreign workers, understanding the economic impact, and automation and technology, which is understanding the readiness to adopt automation technology in the sector. A little bit on our agri-diversity and how that relates to the strategy. We do have quite a bit of work in the Indigenous agriculture space. And so we hosted a session last summer on Indigenous agriculture at CFA summer meetings. We continue to host a sharing circle series through CARC's initiatives. And we have 2 projects, both one on Indigenous women in agriculture and Indigenous youth engagement that we are currently seeking funding for through our Indigenous Agriculture Advisory Committee. On EDI for ag, we are currently developing tools for program development for the sector. And we're also doing some work with women in agriculture. We are the secretariat for the National Women in Ag Initiative, which is the provincial ag groups. Oh my goodness, that was a whirlwind. The provincial ag groups coming together as a national organization and then fostering some networking and event opportunities for them. All right, well, we got through all of that. There was a whole ton of information on those slides, folks, and 20 seconds goes a lot faster than you think it does. But happy to take any questions in the breakout rooms and provide more detailed information about those when we get a chance for that. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Phyllis. I know it is a lot, and thank you. I know you're feeling under the weather, so we appreciate you.
I survived all that. That's perfect. Very good. Thanks,
No,
everyone.
thank you. And so I know I myself have so many questions for you, especially when we look at perceptions of agriculture. I always say, you know, the trades has a bad rap, but agriculture is even below that when you talk about those professions where you get a little dirt under your nails, right? So really interested to see some of the initiatives moving forward on that lens. So next, we're going to turn it over to Dana. So Dana Penrice is, she actually farms near Shoal Lake, Manitoba with her partner and in-laws, and she is the Prairies Program Manager for Young Agrarians and the lead for their apprenticeship program. Dina enjoys digging into the ecological, social, and economic dynamics involved in transitioning agriculture towards regenerative practices and growing farms and farmers who are part of the solution to climate change. Dana is also the managing director of Holistic Management Canada, where she is involved with the Ecological Outcome Verification Program. And in her spare time, Dana can be found helping out on the farm, moving cattle, and more likely her chickens. So we'll go ahead and Sandy, we can have Dana share her screen and highlight her there. There we go. Perfect. And whenever you're ready, Dana, you go ahead.
Thanks so much, Crystal. This has been so fun to put together. Should be working now. All right, thanks so much for having me. So Young Agrarians began in 2012 in BC from a conversation of youth in the National Farmers Union, who saw that there was this trend where youth were no longer the kids of existing farmers. They were largely first-generation farmers who were interested in getting into farming. What they realized was that new farmers were not steeped in the agricultural sector, and there was a need for a group to help aspiring farmers get connected to training, opportunities, resources to other farmers, and to help them build a supportive network. So that's what we're all about. Today, Young Agrarians is a vibrant network across Canada, coming from all kinds of backgrounds and practicing all kinds of farming. And their one thing in common is that they're really motivated to do good for the planet through farming. So YA is the largest education resource network for new and young farmers in Canada. We currently deliver programming in the Western provinces, but our network and our online reach extends all the way across Canada and internationally. Many of you here will already know this, but we are facing a farm renewal crisis. The majority of farms in Canada don't have a succession plan, and many don't have a successor. And what we're seeing is that there's fewer and fewer people on the land. There's absolutely a barrier around accessing land and the capital to start farming. But despite this, people are still wanting to farm and to try it out. What YA offers is pathways to help people overcome these challenges and inspiring examples of people doing it. We do this by helping people with access to education, training, land, mentorship, resources, and capital. What we're really trying to do is to provide people with wraparound services where people can get what they need when they need it. Oops. And definitely we can't do this work alone. First off, we really believe that farmers grow other farmers, and we have an amazing network of farmer volunteers who play a key role in our programs. And also, this is just a mountain of work, and so we collaborate with a lot of other organizations to make this happen. So we have 5 program pillars, and these match up with different stages of the new farmer journey and their specific needs. People who are curious about farming often come into our network through online engagements and educational events. After that, they may want more experience, and so they end up doing something like an apprenticeship. And when they're ready to start farming, we may help them find land through our land matching program, or help them in finding a business mentor to help them survive those first few years of startup. And this is all set up to ensure that farms are viable and can last in the long run. We have a really vibrant and active online community. People find resources and opportunities here. We post farmer stories and events and apprenticeships and job postings and land opportunities. Our online community is a very busy place. We host a lot of educational events, both in person and online. And what these events are about is bringing people together who have a common interest. People who come will often say things like, I never knew that there were other people like me that don't have farm experience, but still want to try this out. One of our newest offerings is the How to Start Farming course for those who are just curious about farming. Participants hear from farmers who are involved in different kinds of farming. They learn about how to start farming and getting their hands dirty. They also learn about Indigenous perspectives and relationships to the land. And for people who really want to dip their toes, they may apply to our apprenticeship program, which provides participants with a hands-on experience in regenerative agriculture. Participants live and work on farms throughout the summer, and the groups gather together over the course of the summer to go to learning events and farm tours. We've been running the program since 2016, and it started in Alberta really in response to this idea that there are lots of existing farmers who don't have a successor, and there's some aspiring farmers that need land and mentorship, but what they really need to get themselves going is that hands-on experience. This is last year's cohort of apprentices who were in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. They were on market gardens, livestock farms, ranches, grain farms, all different scales, but all of them were able to teach regenerative agriculture. The apprentices may come into the program with this romantic view of farming, but what they get to learn is really about the highs and lows that come along with it. We help them to build both competence and confidence that they can become farmers, and also build their peer networks that help support them through their journey. I just want to end by highlighting what is really motivating these new farmers. They are really farming because they want to make a positive contribution to environmental sustainability. This photo is from one of our land matching program participants, where a new farmer got access to this land and in 1 year created this amazing ecosystem. Many of our new farmers are also driven to make a positive contribution to society and in their community. And through Young Agrarians, what we've really seen is that it is possible to get people back on the land, and that farmers can be part of a solution for climate change. So yeah, this is just a little bit about what we do at YA. You can learn more, especially about our land matching program and the business mentorship network. You can see that on our website to check that out, and just reach out to us. Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to the question period.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dana. That was so much great information. And I love the apprenticeship model. I think that is such a key mechanism to move youth and give them an opportunity to experience farming. So great model. And I'm sure folks have a lot of questions for you, and as well as for Phyllis, as well as for Benjamin. And, you know, I myself was hoping to ask you a question, but I think we've kind of taken up that time. So I'm happy to turn the time over to our participants to ask you the questions that you have for the presenters. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen again here. Success. All right, I've got it shared there. So looking at, oops, there we go. Sorry, so for each of the breakout rooms, you are going to have an opportunity to select who you want to chat with. Sorry, my other screen is just coming up here. Just making sure, there we go, okay. And my presenter view is not coming up. So moving into the breakout rooms, you're going to have an opportunity to select which presenter you would like to ask questions. And I know it's going to be hard to choose who you want to ask questions of, because so many questions that I know I had coming from all the 3 different presentations. There's just so much to dive into when we're looking at the Canadian landscape and everything that's affecting agriculture, from entrepreneurship, dealing and starting innovations in rural and remote communities, and serving rural and remote communities with food security and food sustainability measures, to looking at how do we engage our workforce. So when Sandy launches the Zoom or the breakout rooms here for us, you'll be able to scroll down to the bottom of the screen, and you're actually going to be able to select which breakout room that you want to go into. We will have some great facilitators from Roots and Rivers to help the conversation along, as well as we will have French support available within those rooms as well. So with that, Sandy, you can go ahead and launch the breakout rooms.
Still being sort of under embargo, as it's like active research, but very excited to hear about these new materials that have much more efficiency and functionality and can contribute to a more sustainable operation than glass. Folks are also interested about energy management. So how do we manage, sort of the hot and cold and keeping things stable within the greenhouse environment over the course of the year. So Ben was able to share some insight into how those hot and cool flows are managed in order to get as sustainable of an operation as possible. And then we sort of ended talking a little bit about the workforce. And so currently there's no specific training program that, you could walk out with the, sort of exact amount of experience and credits that you would need to walk into Agritech and to sort of know from day one what's going on. So every new hire for them is, kind of taking on this individual research project and lots of on-the-job training. So Agritech North is working with Confederation College and Lakehead to sort of develop some more credit pathways, specifically focusing on Indigenous folks, as these are the communities where these greenhouses and this type of growing need to expand across the North. But yeah, certainly a lot of effort needs to be put in there. And then we also heard a little bit about the regulatory environment and some of the things that municipal and political governments can do to increase this type of food production across the North. And so lots of really specific insights around how, particularly in Ontario, a lot of farming dollars end up serving folks in Southern Ontario, and the types of markers for like the farm gate marker and other things that are land-based function really well for Southern Ontario where there is land. But in the case of the North, where it needs to be year-round growing indoors, there needs to be some new measures and new ways to allocate that funding to make it equitable and to really focus on the communities that need the food security and getting them the support they need to do that. So that's kind of a very quick rundown of what Ben was able to share with us, and really appreciate those insights, and to everyone who asked great questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Haley. Really appreciate that. That concise overview. I think you, from what I caught from the conversation, you summed it up quite nicely there. And yeah, just to speak about the regional diversity, I think that's definitely something that across all of our areas where we are, it's important to recognize the differences that we have between the northern parts of our provinces or territories and the southern parts, which of course have are much more populated. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to Janini. I would love to hear some of the things that were discussed with Phyllis in your room.
Thanks so much, Crystal. And hi, everyone. Good to be with you. And thanks so much, folks who were in breakout room 2, as well as Phyllis. So we had some really great discussions and covered some key areas around the workforce in agriculture. So we kind of opened up our discussion talking about the kind of the hazards in agriculture as an industry and how the health and safety focus has been and is still an area that needs a lot of work. So there's some emerging research and work that's being done around this from different institutions. We transitioned our conversation then into kind of discussing the resources available for newcomers to Canada to transition their skills and knowledge in a meaningful way into the workforce. So Phyllis kind of gave us some background around the Temporary Foreign Workers Program as a short-term solution to the labor shortage, which is a chronic and systemic issue. So around the immigration side, really highlighting that folks are coming in globally with different existing skill sets and interest areas. And so Phyllis really highlighted that there's a need to grow the respective and appropriate connections and conversations in order to connect newcomers to Canada to workforce roles that really align with their expertise and their interest areas. And the person who asked this question also really made gave us a great insight around the connection that's needed to also apply a justice lens to this question to ensure that there is a just transition in the roles that newcomers are taking on as well. So all in all, kind of about finding the right connections and also the wraparound supports. We also talked about kind of the developing automation and technology in agriculture to address labor force shortages, and particularly around constraints that the pandemic has emerged from the pandemic. So Phyllis gave us some insight into the opportunities available to upskill around automation, AI, and digitization, and the application of those pieces in agriculture. And also that these might be solutions to some issues, but not all issues, and that there's still a huge need for that human power to maintain those automation pieces in the industry. So kind of in a nutshell, there's really a need for growing education around technology and agriculture, and that there's a range of skills and talents that we need to make that work. And then we kind of closed our conversation around a question about the divide in low wage and high wage work in the industry. So that all of this work is essential, and how do we incentivize and make sure folks are appropriately compensated for their work. So Phyllis highlighted that there's emerging compensation research that she's doing in her organization. So looking at how agriculture fits in with other industries and what are the different lenses to compensation that we can take to make sure folks are appropriately compensated, and also balancing this conversation around compensation, with how that might affect food prices for consumers. And then as our conversation closed, kind of a last comment around the soft skills focus in the industry, and that those human skills are ever necessary and still a growing focus to the work. So that was a quick summary, and thanks so much, Group 2, and to Phyllis. Pass it back to Crystal.
Thanks so much, Janine. It was so interesting to hear a lot of the issues, and I think, touching on the automation piece, I think it was reflected in some of the conversations that we're having with Benjamin about the need for those skills, and that training piece, to help folks gain the skills that they're going to need in order to work alongside the different automation technologies that are coming in. So thank you very much for sharing that. Now, next we're going to turn it over to Karine to recap some of the discussion that you were having with Dana. So I'll turn it over to you, Karine.
Thanks, Crystal, and hi, everyone. Shout out to everyone who was in breakout 3 for the insights, the questions, and for Dana for your presence and your answers and your reflections. So we all spent 20, 25 minutes together. And we really, my sense is we took a journey from really being in the what of the work, moving into the how, and started with Dana was sharing a bit more about the land matching program and the expansion that's taking, moving from being a little bit more in BC to starting to expand into Alberta, and that there have been expressions of interest from other parts of the country as well. The importance of kind of having that third-party matcher in this program as well, that has that technical support, expertise, and knowledge that can support that matching to happen in a good way. And we really talked about just the importance of the journey, that Young Agrarians really takes folks who are interested in engaging with farming work on this journey from interest all the way to wherever they might end up with it. And part of that is that the paid apprenticeship program that they have, which is reaching its 7th year right now, that there's 80% retention rate with that. People stay engaged for long periods of time. And there's actually a longitudinal study that is just launched that the baseline has been done worth. So in a few years' time, there'll be more data coming through on that, which is exciting. And some of the places that we talked about in terms of just, attrition and how folks get involved and engaged and where they might maybe digress or move apart from the work is really thinking about folks are really after this kind of sense of how to be in the work. And Dana described that, sharing that some people describe that as a grittiness, or even experimenting with what it means for them to be in farming work and to have the ethic and the resilience that comes with that, and the coaching that Young Agrarians also provides. If there's a particular way of farming that isn't working for someone, there's a lot of coaching and support and guidance that's provided to be able to support people to kind of find their way in that journey of where and how their interest and their spark for the work can be applied in a context that really works for them. And yeah, when we got into kind of the how of the work and the how of how Young Agrarians works, there's such a big focus. Dana really emphasized just the social networking component and the engagement, and that folks are, once they come to an event, just experiencing the culture, the support, and the social networking that happens, where people are really interested and able, making themselves available to really generously share their skills, expertise, and knowledge with each other. People having frequently the experience of like, oh my gosh, there are other people like me out there with these experiences and these desires. And just really not using numbers as a measure of success, but looking at where and how people are engaged, the quality of that engagement, how people feel, and really providing that sense of being in relationship and being in community, from farm to farm, from region to region, all across the country. And probably also many things that kind of fell in the betweens there. So thank you everybody. And again, a big thank you to Dana for sharing your stories and your knowledge with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Corinne. Really appreciate that. And wow, I'm just looking, Ashton, at the graphic that you're creating based on some of the discussions that we've had today. It looks amazing as always. Beautiful work, and it really highlights some of the key topics that are being discussed. So this will be sent out as a resource afterwards as well. So happy to have that shared. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here one more time with everyone. And just as we are wrapping up, and before we move back into Slido, I want to make sure that I get my thank yous in there. So definitely thank you to Benjamin, thank you to Phyllis, and thank you to Dana so much for bringing your insights and your knowledge and your enthusiasm and your passion to what you do. It's so great to hear some of the great and amazing work that is happening to really help continue to push the sector forward. So wonderful. And just again, before we get to the Slido, if you are interested in connecting with myself or any members of RIC, here are a few ways to connect with us on this. And if you're interested in learning more about the resources and events presented by the FSC Community of Practice, I recommend our newsletter, which you can scan that QR code right there. And I believe Marie is also dropping a link to as well. In addition to all of our upcoming events, there are links to resources, ours, as well as other organizations that are doing work, great work across the sector. So speaking about our Slido, we are always continuously working to improve our offerings and provide valuable resource. So we greatly appreciate you participating in these last poll questions that we have to really get a sense of how the event was today, and any feedback that you have will really help us share our future activities. So please don't hesitate to share your honest thoughts and ideas. It is anonymous, so just a reminder to access Slido, you can go ahead and scan the QR code, or you can join at slido.com, entering the number that is there as well. So definitely appreciate folks' feedback. And the first question that we had for you is, what learnings from today will help to inform your practice moving forward? So I'd love to hear from some of what you personally took. Was there any key aspect that will help you in the work that you're doing? Would love to hear that. So I see some folks are typing. I appreciate that. And as you're doing that and thinking and kind of digesting everything that you undertook today, before I go on to the next questions, as you know, it will start to populate here on the screen. I definitely want to extend a thank you as well, not only to our presenters, but we have some amazing people behind the scenes and on the screen that you've seen today. So from Roots and Rivers, thank you very much to Haley, Corinne, and Janini for participating and facilitating the discussion in our breakout rooms. To Madeline and Cressida, who are French interpreters today, thank you so much for participating. I can see folks are chatting, but still not a lot coming up there. So there we go, just on cue. Thank you. So, you know, different viewpoints from members of the agricultural operation. That's great. And yeah, the research data available and more that's coming up. So that is great. Always interested to find out, you know, what you took and how we can improve moving forward. So I know some folks are still adding their comments, they're typing away there. I'm just going to go ahead and move to the next slide. In 3, 2, 1. So just really curious, do you consider today's discussion to be valuable to your work? Really interested in the folks that we have around the room. Wow, 100% already. That's great. so that is wonderful. And we will be sending out a quick survey after as well, which is, so if you've answered these questions here, you don't have to do, but we do appreciate that feedback. And again, that great creative that we have, Ashton, who is our graphic recorder, will have that. So thank you very much for participating today. It looks like the storm held off, so and your power held out. So thank you for joining us again today. So looking like some folks are just getting it to a now and still, yes, this is relevant to your work. So that's always great to hear. We want to make sure that we're touching base on and making sure that what we're bringing to you is relevant. And so happy that we're able to do that with agriculture here today. So I'm going to go ahead and slide to the next question that we have is, do any of you plan on following up with any of the experts you connected with today? Really interested. I know Dana and Ben and Phyllis did provide their information there at the end of the slide. So I'm hoping from all three of you, like if you're willing, I'm happy to share your contact information out if folks are interested. I see a head nod from Dana, thumbs up. That's awesome. Because I think, you know, building connections and collaborating is definitely a way for us to improve the work that we do across the country. And there's so many different insights depending on where you are in the country. So thank you for that. It looks like some folks are interested in following up, so stay tuned on that. And I'll move to our last question, which won't be viewed by everyone, but just really curious, how can we make these events more accessible to you in the future? How can we make it easier to attend? Too much technology, maybe step back from technology? Please feel free to go ahead and answer those questions for if there are ways that we can make it more accessible to you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, but that last Slido is, of course, going to be open. It's just that you're not going to see those accessibility questions as well. So with that, we've got 2 minutes left. So again, thank you so much to all of the folks that joined us today and to share their information and their knowledge. We really appreciate it. And with that, I think we'll end the webinar for today. So thank you again to Phyllis, to Benjamin, and to Dana for sharing your insights and your knowledge. So greatly appreciated. And I love the discussion, especially from other farmers. It's always great to hear and see that passion coming through in the work that you do. So enjoy your day, everyone, and thanks for joining us.